record to the cloud, and I think we can get started. I'll just mute myself and I'll hand it over to you.
Sure, sounds good. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Good morning, everyone, or maybe it's good evening where you are. Welcome, and this is a special welcome to our arts, culture, and media students. My name is Kathy Fellows, and I am an academic and learning strategist with the Academic Advising and Career Center, which is your host for today. And today's topic is online learning. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what's involved in online learning, sort of getting you ready for that, thinking about upcoming exams and tests you might have. Obviously, you've been doing some online learning for the last 3 weeks into this semester, and perhaps you are a continuing student and were taking online courses in the summer or even finishing up last spring. So it's going to be a fairly informal session. I'm going to run through a PowerPoint presentation, and I do want to acknowledge the wonderful help of my colleague Florence. We'll be in the background making sure everything is okay. And we do have a chat feature, so there will be some times when I'm going to post some questions, and please feel free to put them in the chat, or if you want to turn on your camera or you want to you want to speak, that's okay too, whatever you are most comfortable with. So let's get on with the presentation. So I hear from students a lot that online learning is really challenging, and I'm curious, what are some of your biggest challenges? What are some of the things that you have experienced thus far? So maybe just type your responses in the chat box. 1 word, 2 words, 3 words, whatever's sort of on your mind. So I'm seeing procrastination. That's definitely one that I hear about, and being distracted, because of that. Sort of it's tough to get started sometimes. Anything else that folks want to share? I know sometimes it's hard when you've got family members around, or pets, or sitting too long. Absolutely. Building in those stretch breaks, that's going to be really important. Anyone miss the people, right? Miss being able to chat with your colleagues, or go to Tim Hortons, have a tea, have a coffee. All of those things impact us. All right, well, thanks for sharing some of the ideas thus far. I'm sure they're going to come out as we kind of move forward with our presentation. So let's move forward, and we'll see where we go from there. So one of the things that I thought we would talk about today is sort of looking at what I would phrase 5 steps for studying at home. And so you see on screen there, we're going to cover sort of designing an environment for success. So how do you set yourself up for success just in terms of the environment that you have around you? And then we're going to talk about overcoming procrastination, because we know that that is something that is definitely been talked about so far this morning. Creating an action plan. So we can all have these wonderful ideas of how we're going to do something, but we want to make sure that we stay committed to that. Making it stick. So, how do we follow through with that? And then also looking at how we prepare for upcoming quizzes or online exams that we may have. So we'll use this sort of as our framework, and we'll go through each one of those. So we'll start with the first one. So let's move forward to the next slide. Thank you. So one of the things that I think is important for us to acknowledge right off the bat is that we are, or you are, learning in a very different way this fall semester. The modes of delivery for our courses, primarily online synchronous and online asynchronous. Very few in-person courses, if any. And that's largely due to the fact that we are in the middle of a pandemic. We need to be safe. And so where public health requirements allow for physical distancing, we may have the occasional in-person class, but I think you'll find that the majority of your classes are certainly online. So when we look at online, just to give us some definition around that, online synchronous is considered where you are supposed to be at a specific time for your course activities. Sometimes it requires attendance. So, you know, what we're doing today is synchronous. We're all online together. Whereas online asynchronous allows you to view the lecture or the tutorial or whatever it may be at a time that's convenient for you. And so usually that's recorded and you can come back to it. So, you know, I just offer this as just a way of sort of giving us a definition around how you are participating in your courses. So let's move forward. I want to talk about trying to do it all at once, right? So what you see on screen there are all sorts of things that are competing for your time. So there you are in the middle trying to study, and you know, you have a Facebook message come in, or friend says, hey, have you seen this YouTube video? Or if you're into Pinterest, or if you're into, you know, looking at your photos or any of the different things that you see there on screen, they all compete for our time. What I would like to encourage us to do is move towards more single tasking. So moving away from kind of multitasking and focusing on studying as being sort of our key thing. So if we look at that from a time perspective, and we want to move towards mastering the art of single tasking, right? That's where we can fully concentrate on one task at a time, where we take the time to sort of shift our focus and fully concentrate on that. So if I'm supposed to be focusing on, if I'm in a theater and performance class and I'm supposed to be, you know, learning the lines for a play that we're practicing, or if I'm in one of our music classes and I'm supposed to be learning what it is that I'm supposed to play on my instrument, we want to dedicate the time to that particular task. Or maybe you are having to complete a piece of artwork or some sculpting or whatever it may be that within the context of your courses, your requirements, that you need to get those tasks done. So it's really a matter of how to be productive in that sense. So instead of having all of those competing things that we just saw on the previous screen, we really want to focus on how do I get that certain task done. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how we might deal with some of those distractions that come up, how we can move ourselves away from procrastinating and get ourselves to the point where we actually can get the work done. So let's think about some sort of what we call sort of studying at home, sort of an environmental quick tip review here. So when we talk about avoid screen time first thing in the morning, we know you're going to be online for your classes, and if there's you could be online all day, and you could be online all day for the wrong reasons. When I say wrong reasons, meaning think back to that screen where we're trying to multitask. You know, we want to focus on what we have to get done for that particular day. So if I know I have a 9 a.m. Synchronous class, I've got to be up and ready for that. If it's at 2 in the afternoon, it's asynchronous, I can watch it at any time. So it's really just being conscious of how much time am I going to be spending on screen and trying to allocate different tasks according to. When we talk about flipping the switch to work mode, you know, we all have our morning routines. So maybe that starts with a morning, you know, run or coffee or tea or, you know, whatever it is that you do. Try and say to yourself, okay, I got to get up, I got to get ready. And so we sort of talk about dressing the part. So getting dressed and focusing on you. I know it's really easy to stay in your pajamas all day, right? Who's going to see me? But sometimes, you know, putting on that that sense of, okay, I'm getting dressed, I'm presenting to the world, just allows us to really focus and get in work mode. So I would encourage you to think about how you work best. Separating your workplace from that of your recreation space or your enjoyment space, it's really important to be able to say, okay, when I'm sitting at this desk, this is my workspace. And, you know, we sort of talk about if you can face outward towards a window, maybe you can enjoy, you know, something outside while you work, and it just sort of helps to keep you focused. I, in fact, can look out my front window right now. Cleaning your desktop. So we talk about cleaning your desktop. When we think of that, we always think of that as being, oh, my computer desktop, you know, that needs to, I've got too many icons, I've got too many things competing for my time. But it also is the space around us. You know, it's very tempting when there's that book I'm reading and I want to pick it up and read it, and it's very close to my workspace. So cleaning that desktop in such a way that allows you to really focus on the task at hand, I think is an important piece we want to be conscious of. When we talk about creating to-do lists, we could do this on a daily basis. We could do this on a weekly basis, monthly, semester. We have a really great tool on our website, the Academic Advising and Career Center website, called the Daily Task Planner. That's something that you may wish to check out. But I guess the point that I would like to raise here is that I think we want to make sure that we have a task each day and that we're following through with that task. And as we move forward in the presentation in a few moments, we'll talk about some different apps that we might be able to use to help us with actually creating those to-do lists. I also want to talk about forgiving yourself. You know, believe it or not, there's only 24 hours in a day. And I know we often think, if I just had one more hour, I could get something done. But I want you to think about being flexible and kind of regrouping and asking yourself, what really do I have to get done today? What can wait till tomorrow? And then picking that task up tomorrow and focusing on what actually has to get done today. So that essay that is due, that piece of artwork that I have to finish, whatever the task is, you know, allow yourself that time to get it done, but forgive yourself for maybe the other things that are coming up during the week. It's really important to have something to look forward to. So building in some incentives, building in some rewards for yourself. You know, if I get the reading done for this class, for my art history class, then I'm able to, you know, maybe have some screen time with a friend. I can do a video chat or something like that. So all of the things on screen here are ways to start thinking about designing an environment that's really going to promote success. Okay, let's move forward. So, procrastination. I'm really curious. What are some of your biggest time wasters? What are the things that prevent you from actually getting the task done? So if you wouldn't mind sharing some of those thoughts in the chat box, that'd be really helpful. So we'll take a few moments just to, great. So I'm seeing TV shows, text messages. I'm sure things like friends, family, hungry, you're thirsty. Yeah, having to go out and buy groceries, which is not an easy task these days, right? We have to have our mask, we've got to go out, we've got to prepare to perhaps line up. It's no longer a, oh, I'll just quickly run out to the store and pick something up. Sometimes it's quite a production. Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing those responses. Some great things coming up. And you know, one of the studies that we've seen tells us that 47% of time online may involve procrastination. And why do you think that is, right? We go on to research for that art history essay that we're working on, and all of a sudden, you know, something pops up on the screen that is totally unrelated. You know how Facebook is always listening, and there's a commercial for something, and you think, oh, I'll take a look at that, and then that leads you somewhere else and somewhere else. So again, we need to be really conscious. Why are we online? What is the task that we are responsible for at that time? Okay, so let's talk a little bit further about procrastination. And when we do that, we'll just advance to the next screen. And procrastination, I want to emphasize there that it's not laziness and it's not a time management problem. Often procrastination becomes a coping mechanism, right? Oh, I'll get to that tomorrow because I really don't understand the task at hand, or I don't have all the information that I need. So we start thinking of that goal, and our mood starts to get a little bit better, and then hopefully we work on the task. But what I would like to encourage you to do is to actually think of it this way. And that would be to, and we can just advance the screen here for a second, is really just to get started. So let's think of that goal. I have to work on that essay. Let's begin to work on the task. And hopefully our mood is going to start to get better because we feel that sense of accomplishment. So an example of this may be, I'm going to go onto the library website. I'm going to identify all the resources for writing this particular essay. Here's the book I know I can use. Oh, maybe while I'm on the library website, I'm going to talk to one of the librarians, and he or she is going to help me identify some further resources. So I really feel a sense of beginning to work on that task. My mood starts to get better because I feel like I've actually accomplished something on my to-do list. So some of the things that we talk about there is, so whether it's studying or working on an assignment, what is the first thing that you need to do to start studying? Well, I need to, kind of need to have all my books. I need to have all the resources. Often we talk about the 5-minute rule and we say, try it for 5 minutes. And in that 5 minutes, if you're not engaging in that activity, maybe that's not the best time to do that. Now, I would offer a little bit of a qualifier there to say 5 to 10 minutes, maybe 15. How long does it take you to get into a particular task? And really giving yourself that time to say, okay, here's what I want to do today. I want to begin to compose my outline for my essay. I want to think about my thesis statement. I want to think about my supporting paragraphs. And if you're not sort of engaging in that 5 to 15-minute time frame, maybe that's not the best time for that particular activity. Maybe I need to come back to that at a later time and work on something else. So, often we come up with things like obstacles, right? We create things in our mind. Well, if this happens, then I'm going to do that, right? So an example is I feel tempted to go on social media, so I'm just going to get up and stretch, and that takes me kind of away from social media. Leave your phone at the desk. Don't take it with you. So I want you to begin to think about, what's that goal? How can I begin to work on that task? Hopefully I'm going to start to feel better about it. And every time I have that temptation of, well, I'm just going to look at this other, website that somebody told me about. No, I'm going to build that in and come back to it later. Often I use a concept called a parking lot. And what I want you to think about with the parking lot is just as though you would park your car, perhaps if you own a car or you have a car, or even if it's the bus, that when the car is there, I can't get to it right now, or I can't get to that bus. But if I park my problem in the parking lot or at the bus stop, I can come back to it at a certain time during the day, and I can think about that task at the time. So an example would be, I'm studying for this quiz, and all of a sudden I remember, oh, I got to go out and pick up some groceries, right? So I write it down in the parking lot being this imaginary place over here. So I have put the task to paper. I know to come back to it. So think of it as I've parked it somewhere. And then at a certain time in the day, let's say, 3 in the afternoon when I'm going to take a break, I can go to the parking lot. I can go to that task. Whether I can run out to the grocery store at that point or not, perhaps not, but I can think about what that grocery list should be. So I've allowed myself an opportunity to deal with that distraction without actually moving away from the task, if that makes sense, right? So again, thinking of it as sort of parking it and coming back to it at a certain time. Okay, let's move forward. what I would like us to think about is, how do we build good habits? And so good habits and specific plans often will lead to success. So, and I started to cover a little bit of this just a moment ago, but using intentional statements that help me achieve my goal. So I will, I will read chapter, well, as we say there, an example, I will read and write notes for chapter 9 for a specific class on Wednesday at a certain time. So if this was something that you were going to do, you may say, well, I'm going to practice that piece of music for my music class, and I'm going to do that on Wednesday at 11 a.m. And so I have a specific goal. And so perhaps some of you have heard of what we call the SMART goal method, where if we were to take the word SMART, you can actually write that down at the moment if you'd like. So we say that S stands for specific, and M is something that's very measurable. A is the action, R is it sort of realistic, and T is timely. So an example of a SMART goal is what you see on screen, that you're going to write notes for chapter 9. That's very specific. It's measurable. You can come back. Did I get through that? The action is the reading and the writing of the notes. The R being realistic, is it realistic to think that I'm going to get through the entire chapter? Perhaps not. So that's where we have to think about the time. Do I need more time, or should I say to myself, I'm going to get through half the chapter? Right? So we want to be, again, very realistic with what we are asking ourselves to do. So as we're doing that, we want to design our environment for that success. We've talked about sort of reducing the obstacles, the distractions, the things we know we're going to take from our time, and really thinking about visual cues that will help us get started. So if I have to read chapter 9 of this textbook, open the textbook to chapter 9. Or if I have to begin, researching for this essay, open the browser that's going to help you do that, where it's the library website or whatever it may be. So again, it's very intentional, and I think that's what we want to work towards. Okay. So I'm just going to take a quick break for 1 sec and ask, are there any questions thus far, anything that you want to put in chat? Because I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you, and I just want to make sure that I'm acknowledging our audience, and if there's anything that's that you're questioning at this point. Daydreaming a lot when I procrastinate. And daydreaming, I think, is natural. We all do that. But, funny enough, we can almost build in time for daydreaming. We could sort of say, you know what, I'm going to take that break at 10:30, and I'm just going to allow my mind to kind of think where it wants. I think the other piece of that is, because daydreaming just happens, hopefully not during this workshop, where you get distracted, right? And it's being conscious in the moment and saying, man, my mind is drifting. I need to bring it back to the task at hand. So it's very much being present in the moment, which I know can be really difficult, especially when we're working online so much. But try and see what your triggers are. What is it that you're daydreaming about? When is it happening? And maybe you do have to deal with that task at the time. Any other things that are coming up that folks want to deal with? And if not, that's okay. We'll have lots of time for chatting as we go. All right, so we're at the point now where we want to begin that action plan. We want to really get ready. So one of the things we talk about sometimes doing is creating a 5-day study plan. And that could be a 5-day study plan from Monday to Friday. It could be Tuesday to Saturday. It could be Wednesday to Sunday, whatever time frame is going to work best for you. And so in that, we sort of talk about what we're going to cover, what did the instructor emphasize, sort of gathering the materials that you're going to need. Your syllabus is a great piece of information. It will tell you often, you know, what chapters you have to read, what's going to be on the quiz, what the due dates are. You want to look at your lecture notes, you want to look at presentation slides, and if you were asked to read articles, you want to make sure that you've gathered those, and your textbook notes, absolutely. And, you know, the other piece of that is that you also, you want to make sure that you're making study notes that make sense for you. And we all have different ways that we make study notes, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. So if we think about having all of these things ready, our 5-day plan may look something like the following. So we'll just advance to the next slide. Thank you. So here, you know, you can see we've sort of used a Monday, Wednesday, and then a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it's not consecutive days, but it's assigning different tasks to different days. And this really is trying to show the flexibility in that schedule. And that may be because, you know, you have a part-time job that you're still able to do on a Tuesday, or you'll see Thursday's not in there. Maybe Thursday is you volunteer, or it's just a day that you've taken for yourself. So first of all, it's creating a schedule that's going to work for your other commitments. And those commitments being, as I say, part-time jobs if you're still able to do them, or volunteering, or perhaps you have family members that you need to look after, or whatever is taking your time. And so once we've established what those days are, then we really want to create that specific to-do list. So as you'll see here on screen, for example, on a Monday, we've assigned a specific time, we've assigned a specific chapter that we have to review. We want to go through homework questions, handouts, if there was a class study guide or any kind of, you know, opportunity where the professor said, it's important that you review these concepts. You want to make sure that you're doing that. And maybe you're assigning 2 different times to yourself. You're assigning something in the morning, you're assigning something in the later afternoon, and in the later afternoon portion between 3 and 5, you've decided that you're going to go through the lecture notes. If there was a guest speaker, what kinds of notes were there as well. So depending on what your class format is like, some of you may have more reading than others. Maybe some of you have more hands-on pieces that you have to do, whether it's you know, a drawing that you have to complete, or it is a musical piece that you have to know, or it is something in one of your elective courses, or you have to do a lot of reading for that. So really, this is just meant to be a template where you can see that you're assigning a time, you're assigning a specific task, and you're trying to keep to that task. The one thing that I want to encourage you to do, when you create this study plan, I want you to think about, when am I my best me? So am I a morning person? Am I an afternoon person? Am I an evening person? When am I going to maximize, you know, all of my abilities, and when am I going to be my best me so I can actually get this work done? But I also want you to think about something that I call your saturation point. And I want you to think of a sponge. And a sponge can only take in so much liquid, and then what happens to that sponge? It starts to drip. So you're a sponge, you're not going to drip, but there's a point where you can only take in so much information. And then what happens? We start daydreaming, we start procrastinating. We've reached that point where I can't take in anything else. So we have to recognize that, and we need to stop, and we need to say, okay, I need to step away from this task. This is not the time to do it. I'm not taking anything else in at this point. So that's where that whole idea of being flexible within your schedule and recognizing, you know, am I having a very productive day? Because if you're not having a productive day, that's the point where you'll read that page over and over again and nothing has gone in, nothing has really stuck. And that's really what we're trying to do at this point, is get that information to stick. So I hope that makes some sense. Let's move forward. I'm curious, because I hear students talk a lot about different tech tools, different apps that they use to help them with things like procrastination or time management. And I'm wondering if you feel like sharing any of the things that you might be using so far. And you can just put them in the chat. Anyone got a favorite app that they use? Okay, yeah, Google, Outlook Calendar. Yeah, definitely. That can be really effective, help you organize your time. Seems that a couple of people are using that. So I hear a lot of students talk about, I was just going to say Forest, you read my mind, that it's a great app. It allows you to sort of schedule time as well. Don't know if anyone's familiar with the Pomodoro technique. That allows you to schedule units of time as well to get things done. I'm also curious, are people using, are they using timers on their phones or their laptops to say, okay, I'm going to study for this amount of time? You know, do you have a friend say to you, oh, you know, call me at this time, I'm going to be studying, but I know I'm going to need a break? Because I do want to, you know, I want to emphasize the fact that we're all studying at home, whatever home looks like for you. So we can engage with our family members if we want to, and just ensuring that, you know, sometimes we can actually have them be helpful for us in the sense of, oh, you know, can you knock on my door after an hour? And that just forces you to take that much needed break. So that is also a way to build in some, you know, some social time as well. So just thinking about ways that you can look at your time. And I encourage you to Google any number of sort of time management techniques or procrastination, how to avoid procrastination. And the internet just goes on and on for days with different techniques that you might want to try. Okay, thank you for sharing. Let's move forward. So this is another one that a colleague actually shared with me called Trello. And it allows you to sort of put your tasks up. You'll see sort of on the left-hand side of the screen. And then, you know, what am I working on? You can sort of add that in, and resources that I might want to refer to, and, you know, personal things that I have to do as well. It's funny, under the resources, there is a reference there to something called the assignment calculator. And if you haven't had a chance to look at the assignment calculator, it is, it lives on the library website, the UTSC library website. And it is a wonderful tool that allows you to actually plan out an assignment. Let's say you have an essay that you're writing and you think, okay, I only have a couple of weeks to do this. And you put in the start date, you put in the end date, and it will give you a day-by-day list of things that you need to do to work towards this essay. What I like to do is build in a false deadline so that it encourages you to get the activity done before the actual deadline, so there's time to revise it or tweak it or whatever. So do check that out. It is on the UTSC library website, and it's also under CTL, the Center for Teaching and Learning. Okay. So just to recap, we've sort of talked about designing that environment for success. We've acknowledged that we procrastinate and that we get distracted. And we've started to put together a study plan that allows for studying at different times of the week, different activities, being conscious of time, and so forth. But how do we actually make the information stick? So what you see on screen is something called Bloom's taxonomy. And it really is looking at how we think, sort of moving from a more surface level of thinking to a more deeper level of thinking, if you will. And so if you start at the bottom at number 1, and you look at remembering and recalling facts, that was certainly something that was very prominent within your high school days, probably even in first year courses. And I appreciate today that we have an audience across different years of study as well. So, you know, some have maybe learned some of these techniques, some are learning as they go. So learning to understand and comprehend that information, and then learning to applying that information to a new task or situation. Where your professors are perhaps expecting you to work towards is really from numbers sort of 4 till 6. So learning to analyze, to examine the facts, to evaluate, so using criteria to make a judgment. So, you know, in an initial essay that you write, it might be more recalling facts, but then as you move into B and C and D level courses, you're really expected to apply that knowledge that you're learning, to begin to be analytical, to evaluate, and then to maybe move towards being more creative, so producing new or original work. So you'll see that what happens is we begin sort of with the very basics, and then we're moving to a much deeper level of thinking. And that's really what your professors are looking for as you progress through the years, and you progress even from, you know, the first essay that you write the beginning of semester to maybe the final one. So building upon that and using sort of this pyramid is a good way to think of that. Okay, let's move forward. I hear a lot of students say, you know, well, I hear a lot of the statements on the left-hand side of the screen. So the idea of cramming, of memorizing, and so forth. So when you think of cramming, I want you to think instead of spacing out your study session. And the reason that I say that is cramming is only going to allow you to remember a certain amount of information. Whereas if we have the opportunity to sort of space out our study session over a week, over a month, we're going to be looking at that information numerous times, and that's going to help that information to stick. So when we think about sort of practicing the content, we really want to look at different pieces of that content. So today I'm going to study, you know, the factual information. Tomorrow I'm going to study more of the comparing and evaluating. So thinking back to that Bloom's taxonomy. Memorizing is something that you would have done at one point, but now you're actually being asked to elaborate on that material. Whereas before you might have skimmed through the content, now you're really sort of generating ideas. This is what I hear a lot about. So studying only in a relaxed environment, you know, where's the worst place to study? Probably, you know, lying in your bed where it's pretty chill, it's pretty relaxing, but that might not be mimicking, you know, an actual test condition where you're timed, you have to sit upright, you're at a laptop. So wherever possible, I want you to think about rehearsal, right? I want you to think about trying to mimic that test condition where I'm going to give myself an hour to go through this information. I'm going to see how much I remember, but more importantly, how much I don't remember. And that's really that opportunity to then go back and rehearse that information so you become more familiar with it. So if we move to the next screen, I'd like to sort of present an idea of that sort of rehearsal of spacing out your study session. So you will see sort of on the axes, on the vertical axes, we see, you know, retention, we see the time elapsed going across the bottom. So if we think about sort of reviewing and recalling information within 24 hours, we see that 67% of what we hear or read is actually lost within that first day. That's a lot, right? That means we're only retaining a certain amount of information. But if we actually sort of space out our study sessions where after 1 week, so 7 days, we're recalling and we're reviewing that information a week later, when we get to the point of having done that over, you know, a month's time, we've had the opportunity to sort of touch that information numerous times. So there is something that's referred to more as a forgetting curve where we forget that information over time. Whereas when we build in those study sessions, that first study session, the second study session, and the final one, that allows us to hopefully have really mastered that information. So we're moving away from sort of the cramming idea, that illusion that I know that information, and we're spacing it out to remember what we learned so that it does stick. So cramming the night before usually doesn't work at the university level, mostly because there's so much volume. And it's impossible to get through it all. We become tired, we become cranky, you know, biologically our bodies can only take so much, and then, you know, we're tired. So we have to fuel our bodies with rest, with food, etc. So if I can make a plug here for encouraging you to really practice the art of rehearsal and spacing out your study sessions, I think that you'll find that over time, that'll be much more productive for you. Okay. So this is really just another way of sort of looking at how to maximize your study times. You'll recall that I sort of talked a little bit about sort of saturation points. So maybe you're good for 30 minutes or you're good for 45 minutes. In this example, sort of taking that 30-minute study block and breaking it down into the first sort of 3 to 5 minutes being, okay, here's what I intend to do during this study session. I know here are the concepts I need to review. And then spending, you know, a good 20 minutes or so actually studying that new material. So in lecture today, this was covered. It's brand new to me. I know I have to familiarize myself with it. And then taking that next sort of 3 to 5 minutes to really sort of elaborate and reflect and begin to build in self-testing. And self-testing, I think there's often we think, oh, I should know this all. But really, more importantly, it's what don't I know? So things that come very easily, okay, I understand that, but I'm really struggling with this one concept. And that's where we really want to go back to our notes, read it again. So it's very much like giving yourself an open book test where you try and learn that concept, you reflect on it, you test yourself on it. So again, that idea of self-testing. Take a break. We suggest 5 minutes. If that stretches to 10, just make sure you're not procrastinating. You come back to it, and then you know, sort of repeating the next cycle of 30 minutes. So again, depending on your ability to stay focused and how much time you have, you can adjust this accordingly. But very much what's important in this idea is really that sense of self-testing. What do I know? But more importantly, what don't I know? And it's those things that you don't know that may mean I need to go to office hours. Your professors are holding virtual office hours. Do connect with them. If you have tutorials and anything, connect with your TAs. That's really your opportunity to ask those questions around the content that you're unfamiliar with. You'll see there that we sort of talk about a 3-to-1 ratio, study and lecture hours. Often we talk about, we phrase it in different ways. We often say for every hour of lecture, you should be spending 2 to 3 hours outside of lecture dedicated to studying. So you can imagine if you have 10 hours of lecture a week, it's about 20 to 30 hours dedicated to studying, which is why students always say 24 hours isn't enough. Okay, let's move forward. So when we think about, you know, how we're going to make this stick, and we talked about the fact that we have to look back at our lecture notes, really what I wanted to illustrate with this slide is that there are so many different ways that an individual can take his or her their study notes. For those of you that are visual learners, you might find the idea of using the visual mapping. The first box you see there at the top, so visual mapping for individual chapters. And that's really just a way for you to, you know, start with something in the center and then look at all the different things that are connected to that initial concept. That will allow you to actually sort of see what you're remembering, what you're not remembering, but you really start to make those connections between the materials. Some might prefer going through sort of a hierarchical area, which is what you see in the second box, which is really just looking at, how things sort of break down. Again, individual style. The Cornell notes, which you see in the third box there, that is, we actually have a tip sheet dedicated to that as well on the Academic Advising and Career Center website. And really what that is a way of asking yourself questions as you go. So you'll see that sort of the page is divided, and on the left-hand column would be sort of questions you want to ask yourself. And in the center column are the actual notes that relate to some of those questions. So it's a way of sort of testing yourself, if you will, as you go. Not that I'm going to go through every single one of these, but I also want to just actually point out one other one there, and that's the flashcards. And flashcards are really helpful if you're trying to remember a lot of terminology. They're a great way to sort of quiz yourself, where you might have the concept written on one side and then the definition on the other. When and if we are back on campus and you're standing in that very long Tim Hortons line, it's a great opportunity to go through those flashcards and just quiz yourself on some of that material. The important piece here is when you're taking your lecture notes, you're taking your lecture notes for you so that you can remember what was discussed in lecture in that particular class. How am I going to remember this? What am I going to come back to? You're not copying down verbatim everything that professor is saying. What you're trying to do is capture the essence of that conversation. And your professor may often say, oh, when I give you a quiz on this, this is going to be important, or hey, this is going to be on the final exam. And those are things that you obviously want to take note of. But I do encourage you, try different styles of note taking. I hear students say, I like to take them on my laptop. I have other students say, I prefer, pen and paper. So try a couple of different methods and see what works best for you. And certain courses may actually demand a certain kind of note taking that works for you. Okay. All right, so now we've come to this point where we're hoping that all that information we've been learning has kind of stuck with us. And now we're moving into, an exam situation or a quiz situation, take home. Obviously, from an exam perspective, exams are going to be very different this year. If you're a continuing student, you may have already had an opportunity to have an online exam or take-home exam. For those of you who are joining us as first-year students this year, we're not having any in-person exams, so everything will be done online. And so, we really have to be organized for that. And, just a couple of things that may seem obvious, but, I just want to kind of go through some of them to help make your experience hopefully more positive. So choosing that quiet space and minimizing interruptions. We all know that if we're sitting, out in the middle of a room, it's very easy to have people coming or going or noises or what have you. So try and choose, the most quiet space you can. Ideally checking your Wi-Fi connection ahead of time, making sure that that's going to work properly. And, having all those materials ready. And again, I know this seems obvious, but just as you would going into an exam situation, be bringing, your writing utensils with you, maybe some water or what have you. In this case, it's, is my computer charged? Do I have like a power cable that I can plug in, in case? Am I permitted to have lecture notes, textbooks, and study notes? Because if it's a take-home, am I allowed to refer to things? Your professor hopefully will outline for you very specifically what you're able to have present for that exam. Paper, pencil to be writing things down, obviously. Water or whatever your beverage is. One of the things that I do want to focus on is around academic integrity. And we hope everyone is going to approach their studies in a very honest manner. Academic integrity is something that the university takes very, very seriously. And to that end, I want to encourage you to make sure that when you are online, that you've closed all chat room features, Facebook groups, whatever you're involved in. And I say this because unfortunately we've had some students learn the hard way where they've had things open in the background and with no intention of talking to anybody, but they just happen to be there on their screen. Make sure all of those things are closed down. Make sure that you're paraphrasing and you're citing accordingly. Check with your instructor as to what they're looking for in that regard. Do not connect or share information with your classmates. Again, very obvious, but just want to remind us that that's still very critically important. And also confirming what tools are allowed in the exam. If you're happening to be taking your quantitative reasoning breath requirement, i.e. math class or something, are you allowed to use a calculator? And if so, what kind? Or perhaps you're not. But those are really important things to check. With a take-home exam, leaving extra time for review. So this past spring and summer, what happened is take-home exams might have been open for a period of time, like 2 days, for example, and knowing that that was the time that you had to work on that particular assignment. So, these are just some very sort of generic things and things you probably already know, but I did want to review those with you. The next piece that we want to look at is really around sort of some tech tips. And that's, unfortunately, we know sometimes that you run into technical issues. So staying on the exam website is important. Sometimes if you think you're going to lose something, copy and pasting your answers into a Word document might be helpful. But again, check with your instructor to see if that is going to be possible. If you're concerned that something has gone wrong, trying to take a screenshot of what was going on at the time, if you can, that's going to be really important. We know technical issues come up, and should they come up, trying to contact your instructor right away. When you're in an in-person exam, there would be invigilators, so senior students usually in the room who can respond to certain things. It's a very different scenario when we're online. So hopefully your professor has told you what to do should you encounter any difficulties. You can certainly contact the IITS department at UTSC, which is the Information and Instructional Technology Services, and specifically the Student Help Desk. They are open from 8 a.m. in the morning right through till 10 p.m. So you can call them at the phone number if you're local. If you're not local, then certainly emailing them, and they are very responsive. So I do want to encourage you to make sure you have all of those handy, maybe going on that website and just copying that down, so because we panic, right? And when something happens, so we want to make sure we have all of those tools available to us. All right, so I have been talking and I'm sure questions have come up. So I would really like at this point to just throw it open to questions that you have around online learning or any of the information that I've shared so far. You can put them in the chat box, or if you want, you can turn on your audio, turn on your video, whatever you like. So anything coming up at this point? I've either wowed you all or you're completely asleep. Okay, so I'm going to read this question out loud. It says, they should have a feature where you can see how long on average it takes students who don't procrastinate to do a certain assignment in a certain class, and then you can plan from there. Yeah, that's a really interesting concept. I think what I would want to look at there is thinking about, I think everyone procrastinates, and I think we procrastinate for different reasons, but I would also want to make sure that as a student, I'm understanding what the assignment is about. I'm understanding where I get my resources, and I understand, what I'm expected to finish in a certain time. I think that's an important way to look at it as well. I get a little worried when we start comparing one student to another in terms of how long it might take someone to do something, because we all study differently, we all have our own learning style, and we all have our own interpretation. So I would be just a little bit cautious about that. But I hear what you're saying. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, so something else in the chat box here. Usually when I'm working on something difficult, I tend to avoid doing it or I procrastinate. So I guess I would want to ask myself there, what is it that's difficult about that assignment? Do I not understand the task at hand? Do I not understand, what resources are available? So really trying to kind of unpack what is difficult about that. Maybe it's that I'm taking 5 courses and I have all these different assignments that I have to get done. But also looking at, when am I trying to do this particular task? Have I taken into consideration when my best time of the day is? What's my environment like around me? Do I have all the resources that I need? But also acknowledging to yourself that it's okay to procrastinate or have a minute where, okay, I'm not going to work on that task. So building in, if you will, some time to say, okay, I'm going to step away from that task for a minute, but also building in, okay, I'm going to come back to it in 15 or 20 minutes. So I think that's sort of the purpose of having a schedule. So I have a question for our audience. I'm curious, out of the different things that you've heard me speak about today, what is one new concept or idea that you may try and implement into your online learning, into your schedule? The 3-to-1 ratio, great. The parking lot idea, wonderful. Yeah. And I think with anything, you want to try some different techniques. You try it, and if it works for you, great. If it doesn't, then you move on and you try something else. And that's really what it's about, is making the studying very personal for yourself. And again, like I said, it may change from course to course depending on what's involved in that course. One of the things that I want to encourage, and this was probably implied, but always asking questions, right? So if you are unfamiliar with a concept, going back to your professor, talking to the professor during office hours, your TA, reaching out to the library for resource information. From a study skills perspective, the Academic Advising and Career Center where I am, we do a lot of workshops around all of these different areas, but we also have a very wonderful set of tip sheets. If you were to go to the Academic Advising and Career Center website, from our homepage, you would see something entitled Tip Sheets. And when you click on that link, you will see a whole host of other tip sheets that come up, and there is a section dedicated to academic and study skills. And I would say that there's about 15 or 20 different tip sheets. all dedicated to the things that we hear students talk about. So there is actually one for procrastination. There's one for time management. There's one for online learning, etc. So they are a very quick read. I'm not giving you more reading to do, just giving you an idea of some things that you might want to have a quick look at, and they may give you some refreshing ideas. And thanks, Florence. We've put up the link there to our website. We also have study skills peers. These are senior students who work with us, who are running some of our study hubs where you can come together to actually study. It's not so much asking discipline-specific questions about your content, but more around, let's say, time management techniques or lecture note techniques and so forth. And again, you would find those listed on our website as well in terms of the times that they're going to be offered. And I should just put out there, since I'm here and I'm an advisor, at any time, you know, if you feel like what's getting in the way of your studying is because you're thinking about, you know, degree planning, course planning, graduation, whatever it may be, you can always make an appointment with an academic and learning strategist as well. And, you know, we're able to talk to you about some of those concerns. We've also put up a link there to the daily task planner that I mentioned at the beginning of the session, and that's a great scheduling tool. Okay, so I think I'm going to have us advance to the next slide, which was really, you know, how to get in touch with us. So as we have been doing since the middle of March, we're supporting you virtually. You'll see that there are various different ways that you can reach us. You can call us if you want to set up a phone appointment or an online appointment. So we do phone appointments as well as video chats. We use Microsoft Teams for that generally. You can email us at the email account that's listed there. We also have an online chat feature as well, and that's essentially Monday through Friday for a 2-hour period. I would suggest that those questions are more surface level questions. They're not necessarily as in depth. The online chat feature doesn't necessarily, sometimes because of the volume, allow us to get into a lot of detail, but it may be a quick answer for you. And we also have what we call virtual drop-in sessions. So if you have been on campus before and you've been familiar with our in-person drop-ins, we're doing the same type of feature where it's sort of, if you will, first come, first serve, but it's all being done virtually, where we would then connect you with the appropriate individual. So from an academic and learning strategist side or from a career side. And I'll just also mention that our career team has a whole series of career workshops that you can access as well. So with that, I would say thank you so much for being with me today. I hope that this has provided you with some ideas around how you're going to approach your online learning. I'm just going to put a plug in there to say that we also have a session coming up next week around time management, and the week beyond that is around discipline and motivation. But I do want to just see if there's any final questions or thoughts before we